video for you guys about adoption and what it's like as parents to go through that process. Ryan, who are we going to hear from today?
Yeah, so we got to sit down with Adrian, who is the campus pastor from our Walnut Creek, your boss, from our Walnut Creek campus, and his wife, Tonya. It was a fascinating conversation about their journey in adoption. I think you're really going to enjoy it.
All right, you guys, thank you for being here. I just wanted to ask you guys, I know for me as a parent, it's so critical that I have like people around me to support me and help me go through challenging times, and my kids are very little. And I've already realized the value of having kind of a wider circle of people around you, especially like Christian friends. What's your guys' experience with that, having Mia, who's adopted, and Nico, who's a biological child?
Well, it's super important to have that wider circle, because those are the people that you're close to, the people that you cry with, the people that you share your stories with. And having a child who's adopted, it's really important for me, at least, to have another or a couple other people who are also in that same environment. You know, they also have an adopted child, so we can kind of, I don't know, compare notes or commiserate together, and just to know that there are other people that are going through the same things that I'm going through.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. I mean, I know as a parent, like, I love to have people I can call up who have a 3.5-year-old son as well, and be like, oh my gosh, my kid just did this, and they're like, oh, I did that yesterday.
Right.
And how validating that is as a mom to be like, oh, I'm not failing at this.
Right.
Well, as well as to ask, I know for me, having a small circle of dads that are just a little further down the road, whether it's being a father of a teenage boy or being an adoptive father, that's been one of the most important things, is knowing a couple of adoptive dads that I can say, I'm feeling this.
Yeah.
How did you navigate this? Or for them to say, like, hey, at this age, blah, blah, blah. It's been really helpful to be able to control the interior stuff that comes along with. If my daughter who's adopted said something, I remember talking to a dad going, is this because of the adoption? And him going, no, it's because they're your child. And to kind of normalize, like, no, you're just, overreacting. And that's a lot of it, because it's, there's a fair amount of insecurity that having people who've just gone a little bit before you or are traveling that same journey with you helps you. Helps you to kind of go, oh, no, this is just parenting.
Yeah,
this is nothing else.
Yeah.
In our society, that doesn't happen naturally. Like, we don't just naturally go, hey, let's get together and talk intentionally about our kids. Like, our society does everything but that. So walk us through, because I think this is a good principle. We call it wider circle at Cornerstone, but this is not just important for parents with kids that are adopted.
Yeah.
This is a good principle for any parent. What intentionally did you guys do? How did you find those people? Did you initiate that? Did they initiate it? What practical things allowed you to kind of find those people that were going to speak into your parenting?
Yeah. With regards to adoption, it kind of happened naturally. So I'll give a shout out to Julie and Shauna. So those are the two ladies that we've kind of went through the process together. And so they shared their experiences. I shared mine. We were like all within the same time frame.
Interesting.
That the adoptions took place. And so so that happened really naturally.
Okay.
With Nico, it's just knowing maybe people from his school, the parents there, the parents in the youth group.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it just kind of happens naturally.
Well, I imagine it's a certain amount of just what are you going to prioritize?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I know for me, with like just having my son who's older, who's biological, it was just like, oh, I'm going to talk to dads who I know, I look at and say, man, I like their relationship with their son.
Yeah.
And so, and those were all friends. With an adopted child, there was, there's one guy that I talked to that I asked him, could I? And we just kind of fell into the relationship. He started coming to church. We became really good friends with the Lynns. And I remember talking to Mark and saying, like, hey, because his kids are adopted as well. And I remember saying, hey, what about this? And that just tends to be our conversations when we hang out, because I know that I need it. So there is the relational community piece, but there also is, for me, there was this very intense need to be intentional and say, I need someone's help to navigate some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Or just to, like you said, just to talk to someone and go, oh wait, no, I'm not crazy, or I'm not crazy in that
and
direction.
to have those
Less
relationships
crazy.
built up to where when things do hit the fan and
Yes.
get crazy,
Yes.
you actually have somebody to call rather than frantically like, I'm
Yeah.
drowning and I don't know what to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Amber, that's
Sure.
where for you and I, in our phase of life with younger kids, the message of being intentional is so important because, gosh, I can feel at times where all the other things that I'm responsible for to keep a kid alive.
Right.
Yeah.
How could I possibly also seek out intentionality? But it's
Right.
such a critical part of not drowning in this parenting thing,
Yeah.
let alone all the other
Yeah.
complexities that come
Or
along.
feel like you're just always just barely keeping your head above water.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like getting ahead of it, knowing like we're intentionally parenting
Yes.
with this end in mind.
Yeah.
How do we get there along the way? Like, you need support.
You do. You need
And
your
sometimes-
lifeline.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sometimes it's just a little phrase that you don't know is going to be important. Because I remember talking to this friend, and I made the statement of, parenting my kids. I want to parent them the same, and it's not that different, having a biological and adopted child. And I remember he looked at me and he said, "But it is." And that permission to go, "Oh, it is."
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So now help me figure out how it is and what do I do differently? Because up until that point, it was all about fairness. I want to be the same. I want to be the same. It's like, well, but your kids aren't the same,
Right.
even
Yeah.
if they're both biological. So now if
And
you
that's
introduce
actually a
adoption,
great lesson to teach your children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As much as you want everything to be the same, that's
Yeah.
not how life works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things that in this group of guys, it initiated a conversation with Nico, talking to him about like, hey, here are some of the differences when he was mature enough to have those conversations that, to be completely honest, if not for these guys, I would never have thought of that. To include my older son in the concept of, hey, this is what's different, I wouldn't have
So
thought of that.
have you had to have those conversations with Nico before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been great because from the very beginning, we talked about, there's this cool story when we were in the courtroom and the adoption was final. They had me and Tonya stand up or sign a paper, and there was no place for Nico to sign. And the judge was there, and when we were standing up to be sworn in or whatever, he looked at Nico and he said, "Young man,
Ooh, that's
stand up. You are the big brother. That's the most important job here."
Wow.
And so Nico at that moment, his face, he filled up with
get
pride. And
goosebumps, yeah.
I know.
he stood up and looked at me like the guy in the black dress knows what he's talking about. But that conversation really started there because then it's like, okay, so if I am the big brother, what do I do?
Yeah.
How do I do that? And so it's been a long process, bit by bit. And even just as recent, as I think 3 months ago, we had a conversation of like, hey, here's what what we're doing. Here's what's unique about you and your sister and what's going on. And so it's been really helpful that it's not the big conversation.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of little teeny bites out of a bigger picture that, over time he's going to have a fuller understanding.
Yeah.
which is what parenting should be, right?
Yeah.
You can't just tackle tough
Yeah, all at
topics
once.
in a
One-time
one-time conversation.
But I wish you could.
Right? Let's have the
Check
talk.
that box.
Let's have a talk, and now we're done.
Now we're
right?
done.
Never means it again.
Yeah.
Speaking of big conversations, as we were prepared for this conversation with you guys, the conversation that Mia maybe has had already, or maybe will have about her birth parents. How are you preparing for that, or how has it peeked through it all yet? How are you preparing for that?
It's peeked through a little bit in
Okay.
that she.
And tell us how old is Mia?
Mia is 9
Okay.
and Nico is 13. Nico's he's almost 14. Oh my god!
Wait a second.
He's 14.
He's 13.
Or what? He's big.
I love when
Yeah.
there's hope for me,
No,
right? 'Cause
well-
I literally I think one of the other videos we shot, I said 3 for my daughter Kennedy, and she's only 2. So we're just changing
Close.
names.
We're talking about
Round
weeks,
it
though.
up.
Right?
Weeks, yeah, totally.
3
Yeah.
weeks.
So you're good. You're good.
Okay.
This won't even air until he's 14.
Right, exactly.
So she was jealous that Nico was in my belly and she was not in my belly, and so she asked, "Why wasn't I in your belly?" And so I remember we were in the car, and Adrian and I looked at each other like,
How do we?
"Oh, what's happening?"
So I turned the radio up real loud.
Hardest
Instead of driving.
conversations happen in the car.
Yeah. So we just, she's always known that she's adopted. And so we just talked to her about the fact that we prayed for her for so long, and that she was born in our hearts. God picked her specifically for our family, and us for her. And so, and she liked that. So that was good.
That was good. Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
She didn't
We
do
kind
much
of
anymore.
calmed that storm a little bit. But I am trying to prepare for the
Yeah.
big when she's older and she's maybe a little rebellious, and I know.
but it was good. I remember that conversation because the introduction or the origin story of a biological child is easy. Hey, I remember, when you were born, blah, 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 and we don't have that with Mia. So it forced me to think about, how do I want to talk about Mia's introduction to me, knowing that I wasn't there for her birth. And so it really started with, I've always wanted a daughter, so I tell her about how I prayed for a daughter. And how I was praying for her, even though I didn't know it was her. And then I get to tell the story of when we first met, the first time I saw her. And it's, the birth stories are emotional, but they're also gross.
There's that.
But being able to tell, my daughter when I met her for the first time, men's perspective.
Thanks.
But being able to talk about my first introduction to Mia when she was a year old in this adorable little lace dress, and I saw her, and immediately what I was feeling, it's every time I tell her that story.
How old was she when you?
13, 14
16
months?
months.
Okay.
We get this wrong every time.
Every time. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys are great
Trust
dates, by the way.
Always trust her. But she has gotten to the point where she'll ask me to tell the story again.
Oh, wow.
And just recently this year, I've asked her to tell me the story. And so she'll tell me the story of when we first met. And it is, it's special. Sweet and it's cool. And I love that she has that context, but that never would have happened if we weren't in the car and it popped up and I thought, I've got no good answer. Yeah. I have no good way to talk about how she was first introduced. And so it made me do that work, Yeah.
But we've always been really open. And with the adoption, we celebrate her gotcha day, her adoption day. And so Nico gets upset because he only has a birthday. And Mia has like 3 things.
She gets 3 things.
But when the time comes, if we feel like she is old enough, mature enough, we can give her more of the story. Sure. We don't have a lot of information. She came, she had a rough start. So, that's something that we need to tread lightly when she's older, when we feel like she's ready.
Sure.
So we're getting ready.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. In the few minutes we have left, I think that we call this video series the Imperfect Parent, because I think we all recognize, we'd all attest to this, there is no perfect parent. But what would you say to someone watching who's either kind of just entered this adoption and they have their new child in their home and they're kind of figuring out their new normal? What encouragement would you give them on this journey that's in front of them? You're down the road a little bit and you have more to go, obviously. Yeah. And you've not got everything right every single time. But what would you tell a parent that's watching in the way of encouragement or challenge or I don't know?
I would say just give yourself some grace. Nobody's perfect, and we all mess up all the time.
Especially Adrian, right?
Well, I would say the wisdom of the wider circle,
for sure.
To use your language, that is enormous. It has been huge for me, and it is incredibly effective wisdom. The other thing I would say is the adoption journey is hard. It's challenging. Sometimes you question yourself, but it's also one of the sweetest experiences I've ever had in my life, to recognize how closely this mirrors the gospel. To recognize that I was adopted into a family that goes on into eternity because of Christ, and now I get to experience that every day a little bit in my family, is a very beautiful and practical way for me to stay connected to my salvation. And so, man, I feel like as believers, the question should be, how are we helping in adoption? Not should we or not, because it is one of the most powerful and life-transforming experiences for me.
Yeah. And it's hard. Having your biological child is hard. Having an adopted child is hard. And the struggle for me is when something's happening. Like we just went through something with our puppy, and it was really hard. Mia had a really hard time with this new
addition.
new family member, you know.
Thought you guys loved her more.
She
than
thought
her?
that the puppy took first place, and it was.
It is a cute puppy, but
It's
not.
just very cute. But it was like
wasn't
what,
that
2
cute.
months. It was like 2 months
Yeah.
of this really hard. Mia like kind of questioning where she fit in the family,
Yeah.
questioning our love for her, and so I really struggled with that. Like, is this because of, you know, are you acting this way because of, you know, your you know, when you were born, the trauma and all of that stuff, or it's just because it's normal and you're a little girl and, you know, little girls are hard, man.
I'm only 2 years into the journey.
Grown girls are hard too.
Hey. So, and then just to know that I struggle with, is this because you're adopted and her identity that doesn't define her, that she's an adopted girl. No, she's a child of God.
Yeah.
That's what defines her. So I need to step back and give her a little grace and just love her. Just figure out, what does she need?
Yeah.
She needs to be loved right now. Okay, so I'm going to do that, no matter what I'm feeling inside and what frustration I'm feeling inside. And that's for, you know, for any kid.
Yeah, that's great advice for any. Yeah. Amber, anything else from your perspective? Any questions that we missed?
One question I just had as you guys were talking is, did you guys always know you wanted to adopt, or was that something that, like, did you guys strategically plan? Okay, we want to have a biological child, and then we want to adopt. Like, I've talked to a few parents recently who have either toyed with the idea of adoption, or in the process of fostering to adopt, or thinking about it. Yeah. And that's just been a question I was. Just thinking.
I know, like, when we were dating, we talked about it. I had always wanted to adopt because I didn't want to go through childbirth.
And I was going to.
And Adrian always wanted to adopt, so we fit perfectly. And when we were finally ready to have a child, 9 years after we got married, he was away and on a trip, and he came back, and we both came together. Hey, I really think that it's time to have a child. Okay, well, let's pray about it. If we want to have an adopted child first or a biological child. And a month later, I was pregnant. So God pretty much told us what to do.
I, from a young age, I wanted to adopt because my mom was an orphan in Guatemala. And hearing her stories of growing up without a family other than her sister, and some of the risks in being in a third world country and her coming to the U.S. and realizing that God worked so actively in her story, I thought, what a beautiful way to honor her, but also to start a legacy in our family that, sure, we have biological kids, but I would love to pass on to Mia and Nico that have biological kids, but also adopt as a way to honor their grandmother who went through some incredible stuff to get here to make their life possible. And so for me, that was always this, really little dream thing that, that I want to, and it's beautiful to see Mia with her grandmother because my mom knows that was our motivation. And so, and Mia is named after my mom. And so there's this beautiful link there that honors her story, and Mia understands it, I mean, to the degree a 9-year-old.
Well, thanks for sharing, guys. This is obviously not all there is to talk about this topic. We could go on for a long time, but in the last couple seconds, are there any resources? And we didn't really prepare. I don't know if we talked about this, but have you read any books that you've read or blogs? And we'll do a little. We can post some links if we forget about them now. But anything off the top of your head?
So there's a book called The Connected Child.
The Connected Child. Okay.
And then there's another book called How We Love Our Children.
Okay.
I don't know the authors.
Okay, well, we'll find them. That's totally fine. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great.
I would just go back to connecting with people that you see have relationships with their kids that you respect, that you would say, I want that. That's been the most helpful thing for me.
Good.
As a guy, I'd rather text someone, what do I say about this?
Then read a book.
Depending on if it has cool pictures.
Sure. There are no comic books.
So I'm out.
Here's how you parent.
No adoption comic books, so I'm not.
Hey, that's a market. I don't know.
Oh, that's really smart.
All right. Well, thanks for watching and hanging out. And as always, if Cornerstone can be of any help in this journey, we would love to have a conversation with you. Thanks for watching. Gosh, what a great conversation. Thanks for watching that. Amber, we talked in the video about a couple resources, but what would you recommend? We talked to Tonya a little bit. What did she have to say?
So Tonya had 2 different books that she recommended. I'm going to make sure I get them right. One was The Connected Child, and the other one is How We Love Our Kids. And we also have a few other links that are attached at the bottom here, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. But as in everything that we talk about, if you guys are ever feeling like, man, I just want to talk to somebody, like an actual person, we here at Cornerstone are here for you on all of our campuses. So if it's something that you're like either like working through adoption or thinking about it or fostering or anything, or just have a heart for it, like please contact us. We would love to help you get a little more plugged in and have some resources for you.
Absolutely. And as always, if you enjoy these videos, we would love for you to give it a thumbs up, but then also click subscribe so you can not miss another episode. We think it'll be worth your time. Thanks so much for watching Imperfect Parent.